Welcome to this comparative video series of Wireshark and Omnipeek. Today, we'll cover Voice over IP. If you're familiar with FTP, Voice over IP has somewhat of a similar characteristic in the sense that it is comprised of two components. The first component typically is the signaling component that gives us an idea of how calls are set up, established, and provisioned. The second component in a typical VoIP call is the media stream, and this is typically the voice portion of the call. When doing analysis in voice, it's important to understand that these two components exist and will be spread out across multiple different protocols. Now in Wireshark, in order to analyze voice, you need to click on telephony and voice calls. Remember the fact that I mentioned that voice is comprised of two different components, so we will eventually click on the RTP stream to see the RTP streams. Once we click on voice, we get a list of calls. We can simply click on a call, click flow sequence, and we'll get a bounce diagram of how that call was established and set up, along with where the RTP streams are and the closing of the signal of that call. If we want to isolate this call, we prepare a filter, and we can see the SIP, the RTP stream, and the ending of the call as well. Now, if we want to analyze the voice streams here, we click on telephony, RTP streams, and we get a list of all the RTP streams. Notice that my call was filtered, so if I want to, I have to know what the call sequence number was, or the SSRC, in order to tie that call back if I'm doing any specific voice analysis. Remember, we mentioned early on that jitter, packet loss, and latency will affect calls, and we can see here where we can sort by those. Now, looking at the same trace file, if I want to get a high level of VoIP, I can leverage those dashboards. So I'll click on voice and video, and you can see the total number of calls that took place very easily, the amount of good calls and bad calls that took place, a timing of the duration of those calls along with the MOS scores. This is giving you the call quality. You can also compare at this high level view how much traffic was going through and the call duration, and if any of those had a specific effect on the MOS score or the quality score. Jumping into the expert view, we can see a list of the total number of calls that took place. The color indications give us the call quality based on those MOS scores that we talked about. And if we wanted to enable additional columns, we can simply right-click and we can get things like what callee port was on. This becomes very helpful if there are specific things that you're looking for. For example, what codec was used, or what type of media was used. Was it voice or video? We can all see that very easily within here, along with expert events that give us an idea what took place. Additionally, if we wanted to do analysis from the media perspective, simply clicking on the media section breaks down. You'll notice that typically, as I mentioned before, you'll have two media streams per call, and you'll see the call number that's associated with that to come back to it. Simple double click on any of these will take us to a bounce diagram within any view. If we want to go back, again, we can go into the calls view and double click on that bounce diagram. Notice the setting up of the call as well, the RTP streams. Additionally, if we wanted to include other columns, we could simply just right-click and get an idea of which calls were affected by jitter, what the MOS scores were, and so forth during that call. In summary, we can see that some of the key advantages that Omnipeek gives us is it's easier to isolate the traffic. The expert events do give us a guide to what may be occurring on the network as far as issues. Enabling VoIP-specific columns allows us to focus on the data at hand that we're interested in, and the visualizations make it very easy in dealing with the data. Within Wireshark, there is no single view that gives you an idea of all of the calls without going into the statistics specifically, and expert events typically aren't tied into the view.